It is 2:30. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see you all. Hope all is going well. Um, my name is Laverne Walker. I am Director of Student Financial Services here at Icon School of Medicine here in New York City. And I have the wonderful privilege to talk to you guys thanks to your program coordinator, Ms. Camille. I look forward to talking to each of you each year about how to move forward towards med school or other health professional programs. And so, if you have a question, hopefully someone's monitoring the screen. Um, if I can't see your hand, um, if you can't, if I don't call on you, call out, and we can go from there. Um, but let's begin. Oh, the objectives today are going to straight to the point. I think to me, the biggest conversation we can have is navigating the financial aid office. All the other stuff, depending on your experience, you may already be quite familiar with the financial aid process if you are currently getting financial aid. We're going to talk about the cost. We're going to talk about the cost of attendance. We're going to talk about financial aid. And as I said, one of my favorite part is navigating the financial aid, because if you understand how to navigate the financial aid, everything else becomes more of a task oriented process and workflow. So, just for a show of hands, how many of you are in your last year at Hunter? Let's see. I don't see any hands. All right. People are still maybe pouring in. All right. So, okay, there's a couple of hands there. Good to see. Good to see. And those with your hand up, and you can just kind of unmute yourself. What's your next step after graduation? Are you going to med school, nursing program, dental school, taking a gap year? What are some of you doing? Are you putting it in the chat, or you just want to unmute yourself and share that information? Let's see. Gap year, gap year. Okay. Okay. And are those who are taking gap years, will you be doing, is it a gap year before you start what, med school, dental school, um, nursing programs? Gap year for med school, gap year for med school. Okay. I'll be working in city med while applying for med school. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. Okay. And is the minus Nicole, who's going to be actually working nursing program? Okay, great, great, great. For the others, are you taking a gap year because you just need a break, or you are doing a fellowship, you're doing some research, taking a gap year for med school, working as a nursing assistant? Okay, so more about employment. Okay, okay, all right. Working and building clinical experience. Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing that. Figure out I was going to med school a little late in undergrad, also get to save up a little money. Gotcha. And that's generally common. Thank you for sharing that. And keep popping them in there. We'll definitely circle back to that. So, a- applying for, primarily, I'm going to be talking about med school, right? But there are a few of you here who are looking at other health professions like nursing programs. Some of you are probably looking at PA programs, and things like that. At the end of the day, all of it is, if we're being honest and transparent, it's expensive, right? Just the thought of it, right? Just the upfront cost of it all. Um, the immediate costs that many of you are looking at are just the application fees, right? The application fees. Um, to apply for medical school or osteopathic school, um, out the gate are almost $200. And then if you want to send your scores to additional schools, that's also another almost $50 to $60 right there. And that's just the application fee, right? There is the exam fee, those standardized tests, the MCATs, the GRE. Um, those are hella expensive, right? The MCAT for 2025 is 345,000. I mean, thousand, $345. The GRE 220, and that's with the hopes that you pass, right? If you need to repeat these exams, you're paying that cost again. And so that alone would cause someone to pause in pursuing this profession, right? There are a good number of you are taking a gap year, one to maybe build up your academic skills, clinical skills, things of that nature. But some of you, one person said to save money, um, work and then so that you are able to save money so that you can cover some of these upfront expenses. Um, the, in that space, if that's what your goal is, if you're like, okay, I got to work to kind of get some of these monies, the question is, what other expenses are you going to be dealing with, right? If you are an independent student, you may now have other financial obligations. You're paying for rent. If you have dependents, you may be taking care of someone. So, how much can you really save if you have those other type of financial commitments, right? It becomes a bit of a conversation that you need to have when you're exploring this. Um, I would highly recommend that take advantage of any fee assistant programs that are available. A lot of times I find students out of cultural or pride don't want to feel like they want to ask for that kind of help. That's a significant amount of savings if you're able to waive out of some of these upfront costs. Depending on your financial hardship or economic background, you may be eligible to have some type of free assistance or even waiver. Some schools offer it, so you can contact them. So if we're looking at the application fees alone, you're talking, as I said, between almost $200. Then what we call is a supplemental secondary application, where that's the school application fee. Mount Sinai, for example, we charge $110 for our application. Um, all of these applications are going to require that you submit your transcript. Your school, Hunter does not, well, last time I did this, Hunter does not charge for a transcript. Um, but if you've gone to another school, or if you've done a community college, or you transfer into Hunter, the likely you would need the transcript from that school, and that's another cost, right? And then there's just the expense associated with the interviews, right? The travel and the lodging, prep materials, grooming. We don't think about those things until they actually happen. And so some students could feel blindsided by that because like, oh shoot, now you came out of pocket, you put in a college application, you've taken the exam, now you're getting responses from these schools and they're like, "Hey, we like you. We want you to come in for an interview," right? And if you didn't think that through, that also can set you back because you're like, "Oh, I gotta travel to Connecticut. I gotta get the suit. If it's an in-person meeting, I gotta comb my hair, get my hair done and things of that nature." So this is kind of give you quick example. On average, again, primarily for med school, a student will send in about apply to 15 schools. So this gives you a quick example of what it would cost to apply to about 16 schools altogether. We're talking almost $1,600. And that's the assumption that you uh, do not need to hopefully buy. This doesn't take in consideration the prep material you may need in order to study for the standardized tests that you need for the programs you're looking at. And so if that's the case, you probably need to tack on another $300 to $400 for prep materials. If you're going to a test taking prep course, that can cost you on average between $300 to $500 on top of the materials. If you're hiring a private tutor, um, that again could range between 150 to $300 per hour, depending on how many hours you need to tack in. So if you take all of that in consideration, you probably are closer to $2,000. And this is just submitting the applications, right? And that could be daunting for some of you. And so when you look at that, all of a sudden you start to say, like, wait a minute, do I need to extend my gap year to now 2 years, right? um, some of you may be fortunate and have resources like family and your community you can pull on. Um, and some of you, it's going to be a real financial hardship. But that said, you want to look at um, what are the workarounds in order to make that happen, right? And so you want to explore what those options are. I see a question. Do you know if the application fee assistance programs looks only at your income? It depends, right? It depends on the program itself. I believe the one that's offered through for the med school applications, it looks at the information for the individual students. Some will look at some schools will look at both you and your parents, so it depends. Most of them will allow you to appeal if you find that the current information you submit doesn't accurately support your current situation, right? So if it's looking for a tax return from a prior year, but your current situation is different from that, you have an opportunity to put down what that situation is so that the program can review and make what we call a professional judgment and override that, right? Um, but if you're in a situation where your family has the resources, why not tap into that, right? Um, because for many of these fee assistance programs, the resources are limited and they're really trying to give it to the individuals who don't have any other recourse, right? So it's just something to think about as you navigate that space. So you get the upfront cost, right? You come out of pocket, you you study, you're good, life is good, you prepare. Now you're starting to get all of the wonderful acceptance letters and from the various schools that you're looking at, right? And for many of you, when you're looking at the schools, the cost, even though we try to be cost sensitive, for many of you, you're picking a school based on the region, the programs, um, the demographics of the school, what does it look like, what is the culture. And so all of those things probably take precedent compared to cost. Like, it's like when you go to a car dealership, right? You kind of have an idea what kind of car you want to drive, right? You kind of have an idea what color, and maybe that's just the female in me. Like the color is important. Maybe you have an idea the make of the car, the year of the car. So you have all of that in your head, and you kind of have an idea how much you're willing to spend for that car. But at the end of the day, when you get to that dealership, you're like, you're looking at everything. You're test driving it, and then it's when you're like close to narrowing down, you're like, now you're back to cost, right? So we like to talk about the cost of attendance just so you can understand the components to it. Like, again, you all are at Hunter, it's not, there's a cost associated with it. Some of you have financial aid. But I sure when you were applying for it, you applied at probably multiple schools and you had a good sense of what it cost. And then you got your bill and you're like, well, what the heck what's this tuition? How much is this I'm paying? Right. And that's become the conversation. So what I want to highlight is there are the components to cost of attendance, right? There's what we call direct and indirect. And as you can see on the screen, direct is basically what you pay directly to the school. Commonly for you, most of you is going to be the tuition and fees. There may be other expenses that you will have to pay depending on the school, but 90 to 95% of you are primarily going to be responsible for tuition and fees. Indirect education expenses, you're looking at housing, personal things. Housing could be tricky because if you're going to a program that has actual on-campus housing, then that's a direct cost to you because you have to pay for that, and that's a part of your quote unquote tuition and fee bill, right? So it varies on the school that you're looking at. The thing that a lot of students don't take in consideration is the hidden cost. Because just like the upfront cost when you're applying for these programs, there's a hidden cost while you're in college. So if I was to ask some of you guys, what's some of the costs after you cover your tuition and is it I don't know if it's common. I would say most of the schools in New York City do have housing, right? But if that's important to you, that's something you definitely want to put on your list, and that information is very public on the school website. Yeah, so I would say comment probably for New York City, yes, because we understand that housing is extremely expensive. At Mount Sinai, we definitely have housing available for all of our med students um, and MD PhD students, and our housing is highly subsidized. So the average rent that a student pays in student housing is under $800 a month, and that's for a Upper East Side uh, shared house space. That's relatively inexpensive, right? Um, and whereas I know at Cornell, which is on the further Upper East from here, and this is many years ago, the average rent was about nine to $1,000, and that was for a shared space, right? So it varies from school to school, but most schools, I would say, at least in New York City, do offer housing. Um, so yeah. So the other thing that students don't take into consideration at times is the hidden cost, right? While you're in your program, you will have exams, right? Some of you are going to programs that's going to have licensing that is required as a degree requirement. There's a fee for that, and you need to prep for that, right? The prep materials. Some of you are going to want to expand your academic experience, and so you want to go abroad. You want to do research. And what I am seeing that's becoming more and more common is students taking a break in their program to pursue another degree, right? A good amount of students will pause on their medical school program to go for a master's program, master's in public health, an MBA. I've seen some students take a break in their program and then go to law school. Like it's crazy. You guys are just beyond overachievers, you know. Um, so I'll come back to that question, Benjamin. And so these are just the things. If you look at your current cost of attendance at Hunter, you can break down what's tuition and fees, which I would encourage you guys to do, right? To actually look at that exercise, like look at your bill, get an understanding what's tuition and fees, look at the cost of attendance, which is public on the Hunter website, right? And see line by line, what are you actually paying? And then what is built into the cost as what we call standard cost, because even though you're not paying it to the school, it's a cost you still incur. So I presume many of you are what we call commuter students, right? You come, you don't live on campus, you commute to the school, and even if you live at home still with your parents or some guardian, there's housing costs. And if you're not paying it, someone else is paying it, right? And so there is transportation costs, you coming back and forth. That's not charged by Hunter, but that is a cost you're incurring commuting back and forth to school, right? So those are the things you want to kind of get a sense of, because that's cost of attendance is the same cost of attendance for all the students, right? Every last one of you guys have the same cost of attendance. Where it may vary would be in your tuition and your fees, because I'm not sure if Hunter is a flat tuition rate where it's the same regards how many credits you take, or is it a per credit rate? If it's a per credit, then each of you may have a different tuition charge because each of you may be taking different levels of classes, right? But at the end of the day, you want to look at your bill and get a sense of what that is, right? And so that is the cost of attendance. And then if you, just to give you, so med school is the same. It's not different as is the cost of attendance, be it undergrad, master's program, grad professional program, it is the same. So this is kind of just to give you a sense of what tuition is, tuition and fees and health insurance in this case, is across these New York City schools, or New York State schools as well, right? And so as you can see, it goes as high as almost 81,000 at Columbia to 4350 at NYU, right? NYU, as many of you may be aware of, in 2019 became tuition free, right? And so that 4350 is really just the fees. Um, Also for in 2024, Einstein is also has become, I believe, so don't quote me on it, you can confirm it, it will be tuition free as well. And so next year, this chart will look significantly different, because these two schools, this will be another school that will have a very low cost structure, because they are now not charging their students tuition, right? And so, on average, tuition across the schools go up between 3 to 5% every year. So the main reason you guys are here, right? Financial aid, right? The financial aid is not any different from what financial aid is at a CUNY school, an undergrad program. There are three basic, or I could really say two types of aid, which is free money and loans. All right. Grants are typically based on need, merits are based on academics, uh, uh, academics, talent, things of that nature. I was thinking of another word. And then loans are something you have to pay back. And what tends to happen is folks get so caught up with the loan thing, we'll talk a little more about it, that they tend to not educate themselves on that option and therefore tend to leave money on the table. The common question I get from students is, how do I find scholarships, right? And I use my response generally is, it's not easy, because if it was, you all would already know how to do it, and we wouldn't even need to be here, right? You all would have found all the wonderful money, pay for your med school program, and you'll be like, we're good. It requires work. And what typically happens is that, well, let me ask this before I go there. How many of you, when you were applying for college, actually looked up scholarships every day until the first day of your class? Just raise your hands or unmute. No one. No one looked for scholarships? Okay, maybe I was too ambitious. It wasn't every day. Let's say every other month before you started your program. All right. Okay, we got a couple of hands. Okay, good, good, good. And Mary, when you are you still looking for scholarships? Okay. May I ask why? You want to unmute? Oh, okay. Not. Oh, you're not allowed to unmute. Okay. Is that on me? Okay. There we go.
So
Yeah.
I, when I was applying to college, I did look for scholarships and I was looking at it pretty often. I ended up just not finding anything. So then that's what ended up discouraging me. But now, like, since I started like the journey of applying to med school or like inquiring about it mainly, I've
Hmm.
been looking at scholarships. I subscribed to a mailing list for a particular website.
Okay.
No luck. So I'm still holding out.
Well, keep holding up. Yeah. Keep hope alive. Yeah. So, Benjamin. Yeah.
Hi, you can hear me, right? Just making sure.
Yes.
All right. So I also look for a well, I look for scholarships for college. Aside from like the, traditional, I guess, well-known ones like FAFSA and Excelsior, I also I looked through some faith-based organizations and other scholarships, and I saw like a wide variety. They're hard to get into. It depends on like criteria and like if you fit the qualifications. And I didn't get into many, but I did end up seeing that certain maybe either faith based or certain other scholarships, they're not all similar in terms of they just give you free money, like here you go, have fun. Some of them might be like, here's $30,000, but it's almost like a loan. You gotta repay it or do something back, and like you might need to. Well, for a few, like I've only found a few, not like very good ones, but I've seen them, and I was like, okay, and some of them might come with some kind of a contractual agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, it is. It is not easy. What I would say is that keep looking. I think if to Benjamin's point, if you belong to some organizations, faith-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, many of those organizations that you already have a relationship with may have some type of scholarship opportunities. I think that's probably the first place you can probably start. For those of you who parents may work for these large public companies like a Ford or a Disney, for example, they also may offer scholarship opportunities. The key thing is you do want to keep looking. It is a tedious task at best. It is. My recommendation would be to um, first come up with kind of a canned essay. And all you're doing is tweaking that essay for each submission, because that in itself can just cause you to be overwhelmed, right? Every time you have to write a new personal statement, essay, example, kind of write your biggest personal statement, your biggest kind of, you know, essay, and then tweak it for each of the requirements that each of the scholarships are offering. My other recommendation would be maintain some type of scholarship catalog, right? A spreadsheet, something as simple, and just kind of start cataloging them with the due dates and the amounts. My thing is, a lot of times I find students tend to self-select themselves out of a scholarship opportunity because they're like, oh, it lists 5 things, you have 3. And you're like, oh, I'm not going to get it. Here's what's happening on the back end. These scholarship organizations want to spend their money. And because sometimes they may not get a robust list of applicants, and they only have to work with whoever submitted, trust and believe they're going to make it work. And so I tell this story. This is going back eons. We had a scholarship. The scholarship was very specific because it was looking for a student in a specific ethnic background. It also needed the student to have demonstrated a financial need. And at the time, I had the background, but the students that I pulled up did not meet the economic need. So I reached out to my development office and said, hey, look, I don't have anybody this year. And it was a pretty hefty, scholarship. It was a $40,000 a year scholarship. And I think, oh, well, if I can't find anyone this year, they'll just table and defer till next year. And they are telling me, they're like, no, Laverne, we got to spend this money. I'm like, what? So now I'm in my office way longer than I want to be, because now I got to figure out who I'm going to give this money to. You, as the submitter, you don't know I'm in my office till almost 9 o'clock trying to creatively pick somebody to give this money to. But I only could work with the database that I have. And that's every student who, at one point or another, submitted an application to me. And so, magically enough, I creatively found a student, gave them a name, and the student on the next business day got a wonderful letter from me and from the donor saying, congratulations, you're now eligible for a $40,000 a year scholarship. And I say that story because only reason I was able to select someone because they were in my database. So I say that to say that even if you don't have all of the requirements that the scholarship is offering, submit it. Because you, interestingly enough, you may have been the only one who submitted it, and they're like, "We got her, we got him. We're gonna give the money to." Um, so there isn't a quick fix. The only thing I would add is you want to be careful of scams. So as Benjamin was talking about, a scholarship is what it is. It's free money, right? There may be some scholarships that do have some type of contractual commitment, like a service commitment, things of that nature. But you also have to look at that and see if that's something you can commit to. Because if you don't, then the penalty may be it turns into a loan, right? And so if you're unsure about that, my thing is don't even think about that. Now, if the loan is not going to be too burdensome, you may say, okay, I'll take the risk, right? If it's I get this money up front, and then turns out, and we'll talk a little more about the different types of loans. It may be, but that's something for you as an individual. You must really want to weigh for yourself to see what that commitment looks like, if that's something you can commit to. So I just want to kind of share with you guys those same schools that we looked at when we looked at what their tuition was, is the percentage of the number of students that receive aid from their school, right? And so as you can see, NYU is 100%. Ours is 61% because more than 40% of our students are self-payers, right? So we generally, from year to year, have what I call a more affluent class population. So this is not because, and we cover up to 100% of the unmet need, right? And I'll talk a little bit about what that calculator looks like as well. But again, these are schools that you can get a sense of who gives need, and this is need-based aid. This is not necessarily merit, because merit could be in addition to the need-based aid. These are the students who are applied for financial aid, demonstrated need, and their school said, here you go. NYU is the only one where it's not based on need because, again, they're tuition free now, right? So just to give you a sense of what that looks like. Here, again, you get a sense of the average amount of money that's given to a student, right? And so it ranged between almost 90,000 to as low as 48K, right? Um, Almost 49K. And so these schools offer funding to their students. And this is a combination of, these are grants, right? This is not counting the loans. This is just counting grant money that's offered to students who demonstrated need. And so these are just some of the things that, as you get your acceptance letters, the next thing you guys are going to be looking at is the financial aid. And what tends to happen is students, I want to make sure students are comparing apples with apples, right? Because what happens is that students will like, well, John Smith School just gave me aid for 60,000, and you're giving me 40,000. The math is, it's the math, and I don't have a slide there. So how need-based aid is determined is cost minus the family contribution. If you're looking at the FAFSA, is the student aid index equals the unmet need. So if we go back to this slide where we're talking about the cost, right? Each of these schools, because their cost varies, their need-based allocation is going to vary as well, because it's basically a ratio of the cost minus the family contribution equal to unmet need. So if we're looking at, let's go to Mount Sinai, right? So if the average cost is 73,000, let's say the family contribution for now is 0. And that's determined by the financial aid application, right? So that means I need to give you 77,000 worth of aid. And our allocation is a combination of grants and loans. And so we have what we call a base loan. A base loan is, in our case, is 18,750. Let's just round up to 20,000. So that means if I take the cost, family contribution is 0, right? You need aid of about 77,000. You take out the minimum loan of 20,000. I now need to give you grant aid of $50,000, right? If we look at Columbia, cost of attendance, family contribution doesn't change, it's still zero. Columbia is like, got to give you $80,000 worth of aid. I don't know. I know Columbia offers a base loan. I don't know what their base loan is. So let's assume their base loan is 20,000 like ours. That means Columbia is now giving you $60,000 worth of grants. Got it? So when you're now saying, hey, Mount Sinai, Columbia gave me $60,000, can you match it? They're like, no, because the reason they're giving you 60 because they're about $10,000 more than we are. Right? Where you may have some wiggle room in negotiation is with the merit. Right? So if Columbia is offering you an admissions merit and Mount Sinai is not, now you may have some leverage and say, hey, Columbia is giving me $10,000 in a merit. Can you match that? That's a conversation. But when it comes to the need-based calculation, we're all looking at the same financial information that you submitted to us. Questions? I'll pause that. I said a lot. Any questions on that? Does it make sense? Thumbs up. You can use it. Let me see some reaction. Does it make sense? Outcome and our merits based on scholarships. Not too common. Not too common, Anna. I can say of those schools, if we go back to this slide, we do merit, but it's not guaranteed every year because it's contingent on what we have in our portfolio. I believe Columbia and Cornell still does not do merit. NYU doesn't do merit because, again, they're no longer charging a tuition. I'm not clear, and if the SUNY schools do, it's probably very little. Yeah. And same with the CUNY school, it's probably one or two they may give out, and that's probably what we like. You guys probably heard of the kind of the presidential, right? Those are probably they're rare. They're rare, but it doesn't hurt to ask. A lot of it, if it is available, it would be on their website. If you don't see it on their website, and I'll answer that more. So I'll give a fuller answer to that when I talk about how to navigate the financial aid office, right? So the other thing is the debt, right? It's inevitable. I don't know if you can avoid that. It's just the inevitable, right? So this is just some med school debt facts here that you can see. I also will make sure I share these slides so you guys can have them. Benjamin, does this mean if Columbia base loan is 30 and their tuition is 80 with a zero? Yeah, yeah, yeah. While you have a greater amount of financial burden as compared to taking an amount I offer the lower the base loan. Yeah. But the base loan doesn't mean that's the maximum amount of loans you're going to have, right? So in this scenario where you're zero family contribution, yes, the base loan is the max. So you're getting the difference covered in grants. What tends to happen as each year move forward is you may have some other educational expenses. Remember I talked about those hidden educational expenses. So if you incur those expenses and you have zero family contribution, the likelihood you have limited resources. And so you probably will need to borrow additional aid loans in order to cover those other educational expenses. And a lot of times students they're like, wait a minute, I thought it was this. I'm like, yeah, but you still needed to borrow because you needed to get prep materials and things of that nature. So as you can see here, last year, the average debt was $205,000. The debt, the medium debt between public and private school is more expensive. but private schools tend to have more aid and grant to offer than public schools. But we also, as I said here, we tend to see more affluent students in the private sector. And so, what factors into that debt is students who may have other resources still prefer to borrow because it may just be cheaper for them to borrow than taking from other resources that they may have at that moment. And we're also seeing a significant increase in students with credit card debt. And it is of my mindset, if you're in that space, for those of you who are maybe postponing and coming into your grad professional programs, if you do have credit card, that is the one thing you want to try to pay down because carrying credit card debt while you're in med school is extremely stressful. Because unlike your federal loans, um, credit card companies are not going to let you put that on pause or defer payments while you're still a full-time student, right? So let's jump into the financial aid process. So the financial aid process is, again, it shouldn't change from what if you are currently receiving financial aid while you're a student at Hunter, the process is relatively the same, right? You'll still need to do the federal application, which is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. Some schools will have what we call a institutional application. That would be a CSS profile or even a homegrown application by the school itself. Med school does require let me put it this way, most med schools require the information of you and the parent. So for many of you who parents are like, you're getting out of undergrad, we're done, we don't have to give our information. If you are going to med school, that is not your parents' release. They will still need to provide their information. Some schools, like us, we do have an age cap. If you are 33 and older, we do not need your parents' information. The average medical student age is 24. So it's rare for us to see a student who is what I would call a non-traditional student who's over the age of 30 enrolling into med school. But if you are 33 and older, we do not require the parent information. Some schools have it older, some schools, um, regardless of the age, still want the parents' information. So that's something you want to be mindful of, and you want to have a conversation with your family if you're in that situation. Let's see, I know we're talking about med school, but do you know anything about how common it is for residencies to cover some of the debt? Um, Probably zero. Milan, probably zero. Um, because what many programs see the debt as an investment towards your degree. Um, so I am not familiar with a program that will cover a student's debt. There may be programs that the residency program offer, and like as Benjamin said, some type of service commitment, and therefore will probably do some type of loan forgiveness or debt cancellation if you are willing to make some type of service commitment to them. But there are programs out there that will help you in that space. So it's something to look at. For undocumented students, it is again important to be aware of what those guidelines and requirements are. I think we're in a very different climate right now. So don't know where this is going to go in hell this year or even in the future. My thing is, if you are in that situation, you definitely want to reach out to the schools and just kind of get some clarity on what those requirements are, what those guidelines are, what benefits you are eligible for and services you are eligible for. Currently at Mount Sinai, we do offer aid to students who are not US citizens. And so those students are eligible for the same type of aid that a student who is a US citizen. So you want to look at that. I think a lot of schools currently with this current um, executive order that's out under this current administration, many schools are now scrubbing their website, so this information is not as public as it may once have been. And so these are some of the questions you may want to contact the school directly. If the school is within the state that you want to be in, you may even want to visit that school in person. And so it's just something to think through as you navigate this space in this current climate. So just kind of give you a sense. This is what I was talking about when I talked about how the financial aid is calculated, right? So you have the cost minus the EFC and the unmet need. And so the responsibility of the breakdown, it looks like this, right? So you have the cost of attendance minus the EFC unmet need. And here's where we talked about the loans, the grants, and the optional aid is generally another loan that you would borrow if you're unable to come up with this amount. This is generally here is borrowed, right? Or this is where you will then maybe have external scholarship opportunities, and therefore you're able to replace this index and use that as in a form of a scholarship. In the space where need-based and merit is allocated to you, you're looking at, again, all grants and the merit, and therefore you don't have any loans because the school offered you a merit, or you were able to find an external merit to cover that. So again, at the end, the total aid is still 85,000, but the allocation may differ depending on what's awarded to you. And let me, just the thing with Alec, these things that I'm not get it off here. Got it. So with the fact that loans are inevitable, right? It would be probably less than 1% of you who won't have any student loan debt at all throughout the entire time of your program, right? Be it med school, nursing program, dental school, unless you coming out of pocket, you're definitely going to have some debt. Dental school is probably the most expensive of the health programs that are out there. And in my years of experience, those programs generally have the least amount of aid offered to students in that space. But that said, there are forgiveness programs out there to help you alleviate this debt in exchange for your service, right? The one you guys probably hear about often is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. That program is Department of Ed, where you work in a nonprofit for 10 years and you're in specific repayment plans. And after 120 payments, 10 years worth of payments, the balance is forgiven and it is not taxable. Another one is the National Health Service Corps. They will cover about 30,000 a year, and that does have a service commitment attached to it, right? You kind of sign up for it. They tell you where there are targeted areas where they will want you to work. In exchange, you will work in those areas. In exchange of your service in those areas, they will give you 30,000 a year, right? A lot of times there are students who are particularly going into medicine are hear misnomers about this, right? They're like, oh, you only have to be a family medicine, you have to do this. No, at the end of the day, all of those areas that are in need physicians of all specialties. And so just be open to what that looks like. Okay. Um, I will do so. So just be open. This is a great time to explore what if you're someone who is adverse to debt. Um, and that's one of the things that almost, paralyze you from moving forward and pursuing the career of your choice. My thing is educate yourself on these various programs out there, because once you are informed, then you hopefully it will lessen some of the anxiety around borrowing, tens of thousands of dollars in order to, invest in your education. So what I mean by not taxable. So what it means is that at the end of the forgiveness, right, there's going to be a certain amount, right? That's so if you borrow, let's say 100,000, and after you honored the service commitment and you met the requirements, let's say you still had $50,000. So you only was responsible for 50% of it. That $50,000 is cash. And in most places, in most spaces, that will require you have to report that to the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and pay taxes on it. Under the public service loan forgiveness, that portion of your loan that you do not need to pay back, you're not responsible for any tax liability on that. So that's what that means. There are some programs out there that will again have a debt cancellation associated with it, or some type of forgiveness. However, you may still have some type of financial liability where you still may have to pay some taxes on that, and that's something you can talk to a tax professional with to see what that look like. And so when you look at some of these programs, you want to just have a better sense of what does the unpaid amount that you are no longer responsible for, what does that look like? Will you have some kind of tax liability? And if you don't, it's a delicious thing, right? Keep in mind, this piece is governed by Congress. It can change, right? And I know sometimes people don't want to talk about politics and what that looks like. Um, this is where you really want to be abreast of where your state representative stands, because these are the things that will impact you in the long run. Yeah. And some of you are like, I just want to go to med school, or I just want to get into my nursing program. Like, don't bog me down with all of this stuff, right? But it is something that you just want to be mindful of as you navigate these spaces. Another popular program is the military as well. So these are just a handful of some of the programs that are out there that I would encourage you to take advantage of and just explore. So, navigating the financial aid office. When I used to do this presentation in person, I used to poll the room and say, how many of you had a great financial aid experience, right? And mostly no one would raise their hand, right? I would get more people who would talk about the horrific financial aid experience they had, right? Sometimes because the person was rude, or the office was rude, or you didn't get enough money, or in this case, they didn't respond to your email, or you go up there and every time you go up there, you are told something different, right? All of that can impact your experience, right? And you're like, God, I just want to go to school. I got to deal with this BS every day and da 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 da, right? And some of us just want to put our heads in the sand, don't even want to deal with it anymore. My thing is that med schools, grad professional programs, most financial aid office are a bit more student centric because we're smaller. We tend to have a more high touch with the student. And so I would say if you had not so positive experience, try not to bring that story to the new school. Give them a chance, right? The key thing is, as you guys get your acceptance letters, get your interviews, go see the financial aid office. A lot of times when you guys do these interviews, again, because we associate money, if you don't have it, with shame, right? Like, I don't want nobody to know I can't pay for this. I don't want to know I need help, right? We come with that story, At the end of the day, my primary job is putting money in your hand. That's my primary job, right? So I can only do that with someone who's engaging with me through either the application process that we put out for you guys to submit, or you introduce yourself when the opportunity presents itself. If I'm in a meet and greet space, you made the trip to come visit a school. They took you on a tour. You met the faculty, you met fellow classmates. How do you not talk to the people who could give you money, right? Like, I don't understand that. And I think by doing that, you get to assess early on what that looks like, right? It doesn't mean you come to the office and say, oh man, these people are mean. I don't want to go to this school. No, that's not it. Now you're like, oh, I know who I'm dealing with and how I'm gonna navigate this space, because at the end of the day, 90% of this school is still my top choice. They just may have an asshole in the financial aid office, right? Right. And even if that is the case, let the admissions office know, because the admissions office may not know that the reason they're losing quality students because they got some simpleton in the office who act like they don't want to do their job, right? And so this is an investment. If you went to fine dining, you went on vacation, you expect quality service. And so if you don't get it, I don't know about you guys, you're either writing on Google, this place suck, or you're on Yelp, this place suck. So that everybody know, or you're on IG, maybe I'm dating myself, you're on IG saying this place sucks. But you're letting people know, I came there, I wanted to have a great experience, and I didn't have that. So you would treat the schools that you guys are looking at in the same manner. You came, you spent money to apply for the school, right? And then you get called in for an interview. And then if you're proactive, you're like, hey, I want to talk to someone in the financial aid office. And you get there, and that person is not student centric, cordial. You want to give that feedback to the admissions office, right? The other thing is, so that's that, right? Read your email, guys. A lot of times we're chasing students, and I know you hear this all the time. We all get a lot of email. You want to read it because at the end of the day, you could be leaving money on the table. Most financial aid offices are not just emailing students with just noise. We're not. We're sending you something that warrants your immediate attention. We want to give you something, or we need something from you, right? It's transaction, right? What will also keep you sane is record keeping. A lot of times students come to us and they don't have their files together. So now I'm spending more time with you because you don't you don't have a clue. You didn't look at your bill. You don't know why something was given to you. If you get organized, it will make it for a much smoother transaction in that space. You want to get the name of every person you spoke to. It holds us accountable. It also streamlines the communication so that if you came in my office and you spoke to someone on my team, I can then confer to that person and say, hey, such and such came in, what happened, right? Or even better, you don't have to repeat your story because now I can find out up front. If you email me and say, hey, Laverne, I spoke to Sally in your office, da 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 da. Before I respond to that email, I'm talking to Sally. Hey, Sally, what did she say? What did he say? Cool. Now we can get to the solution, right? You don't have to repeat your story and we can move forward. And the other piece is do your homework. A lot of times you guys ask questions and the information is at your fingertip is on our website. And so what I tend to tell students, do your due diligence, look on the website. And if you want to know how you get someone to overshare, you can say, this is a perfect thing. I was on your website and I was looking for this, but I didn't see this. Now I'm like, oh, somebody came to do some work. So now I will tend to overshare because if you call me and say, or you email me, or you walked in and you tell me, hey, what's the tuition? I'm gonna look at you side eye because I like that's on my website. And now I got judgment, right? I'm like, oh, this, and I'm just keeping it real. This lazy son of a gunny, right? I'm like, it's on our website, move on, right? Now, if you're like, hey, I was on the website, I saw the tuition, but I couldn't find where you guys talk about the average merit that you give. Now, hold up. Now I'm pulling out the secret envelope and I'm now oversharing because you have met me 51% of the way. And now I'm a partner with you because I'm like, I want to see you win, right? And because you're going to stand out that way, you're going to get more from not only just the office, but probably they're going to partner you with every other key person you need to touch base with. It's just how you navigate the space. It really is. It makes a world of a difference. And you guys, again, we all got these phones, you got the internet, utilize these tools. The WMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges, is probably the best resource for those of you who are pursuing med school. I presume there's something similar for nursing, dental, all of that. The studentaid.gov is another, poignant site you want to go on because that's where the federal aid is. That's also where you probably can see some of the state information. National student organizations, I spelled the word wrong, should be where you should be connecting with. These are just two of them that I commonly do talks at as well. And here's my information. I'll leave that up for you guys. That you should check. And so I would say I said a lot. I will make sure these slides are with you guys. I'm going to stop sharing. Um, I think we're a little over time. So those who have questions, I can hang a little longer. And for those who want to go, thank you for your time. I appreciate you all. Let me jot my link in the chat and you guys can have it. Oh my God. Yeah. Questions, thoughts, let's see. I have no tuitions. Let's see. I think Benjamin had a question. Ben, you want to unmute yourself? Do I need to unmute you? You want to ask your question? Okay, he may have left the room. Let's see. Let's go down. Let's
Yeah,
see.
I was
Could you
gonna
please provide? Oh, hey, Benjamin. Yeah. What was your question earlier?
I was gonna ask if your institution, Mount Sinai, provides kind of like a support, like so like money for a medical student who wants to live with, like, let's say, I don't know, a spouse or like a brother or something, like if two people get into school, or like maybe someone's in the master's program, I'm in the medical school, for example, and we want to live together, me and my brother, for example, in one apartment. We find one nearby. Would there be any support? Kind of like how it is for physicians sometimes, or no?
So the because part of the cost of attendance, right, which is the standard cost for all students, housing is a part of that. So if you are residing, so financial aid will be calculated based on that, right? So going back to that cost of attendance, let's say is 80,000, housing is a part of that. So your aid allocation will cover housing, right? However, if you are living someplace that's above the standard, you can do what we call a budget appeal and increase the cost of attendance. So let's say we allocated housing 1,000 a month, right? So the first year for a first year of med school is usually 10 months. So that's $10,000. And so that's part of your financial aid allocation. But let's say housing, on campus housing doesn't work for you. Like you say, you may have a relative or something that you have to live with. So now you're paying housing that's maybe $1,500 a month. So it's $500 more than what was in the standard budget. You can do a budget appeal. increase the standard to the additional 500 a month. And the likelihood, most schools will offer that in the form of a loan, right? You won't necessarily get any grants to offset that additional housing cost. So most schools do have a budget appeal to cover housing, cost of living. And you bring something up, Benjamin, that I want to speak. So some of you, what will be what we call non-traditional students, some of you probably have spouses and dependents. The cost of attendance is only looking at a single student. It is not taking consideration students who have family. And so that becomes another financial challenge if that's your situation, because you tend, unless that significant other, that family member is working and bringing in, income, the likelihood that becomes a financial obligation for you, and then you tend to borrow more to cover the cost of living for yourself as well as the dependent and the significant other that you have. That's a challenge, right? And that's something you have to weigh and what that looks like. Another thing, speaking about family dynamics, is you guys also what we call the sandwich generation. Many of you are taking care of aging family members, and that becomes a financial challenge as well as an emotional obligation and commitment. That gets really, really hard because unlike taking care of a child or a spouse, many schools will not necessarily support you if you now have to think about financially taking care of aging relatives. So if that is your situation, that would be one of those great questions that you want to navigate through the financial aid office. Let's see here. I know we talked about that. Can you explain? We talked about that. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the presentation. Could you provide a reflection? Can you please provide a reflection form for this seminar? I don't know what the reflection form is. I don't know what that is. I will follow up. Let me take a screenshot of that question and follow up with Camille. All right, guys. It was a pleasure chatting with all of you. I wish you all the very best. Do not hesitate to reach out to me at any time. And for those of you who are looking at med school, I hope to see you around. Have a good one.